All right, hope everybody's doing great tonight. Hope we get a few chuckles out of tonight. I don't do this very often, so you're perfectly welcome to groan instead of laugh, okay? So I'm going to start out with a little joke about a woman that was standing at a bar. And she just hated her life. She hated her ex-husband. He was a mean, vindictive man, and she wanted him dead. And so she's complaining to the bartender. Guy walks up and he says, hey, he says, couldn't help but overhear the conversation. He says, let me introduce myself. My name's Artie. He says, I'm an out-of-work hitman. I want to get back into business. I can take care of that husband thing or ex-husband thing for you. She says, oh, I couldn't afford to put a contract on my ex-husband. And he says, I tell you what, I need the practice. I want to get back into business. I'll do it for $1. She said, okay. So she gives him $1, and he says, okay, what's your husband's habits? She says, well, he always goes to Coburn's late Friday night and gets his groceries and all that stuff. He says, okay, no problem, I'll see him there. So he's in the parking lot. Husband comes out, or ex-husband comes out, opens up the trunk. Artie comes running up behind him and strangles him and throws him in the trunk. Bag boy says, hey, mister, you can't do that. Strangles him, and he throws him in the trunk, slams the trunk lid down, and takes off down the road. Well, the police caught him. And you know what the paper said the next week? Artie chokes 2 for $1 at Coburn's. There was a fire at a woolen factory. The firemen show up and they're watching the flames and they're coming out of the first floor, and there's a flower shop next door, and they can't figure out how they're going to stop this fire before it spreads into the flower shop where these invaluable orchids are being grown. So while they're trying to figure this out, the floor burns through, and the second floor where all the sheep are come down, they smother the fire. And so the firemen learned an important lesson that day. Only use can prevent florist fires. And no sheep were hurt in the telling of that joke. So there's a young couple that had just come back from their honeymoon, and they got together with some friends of theirs. And as usually happens when these things happen, the ladies go to the kitchen and the men sit in the living room and they're watching sports and they're telling stories and so on. And the newlywed husband says, hey, you guys, he says, my wife and I went to a restaurant last night. He says, fantastic, new Italian restaurant. It was great. Food was super. You'll love the service. Everything was fantastic. And they said, what was the name of it? Oh, man, you guys know I'm terrible with names. I can't remember names. He says, what's the name of that flower that you give when you're in love with somebody? And he said, Rose? He said, yeah, that's it. Hey, Rose, what was the name of that restaurant we went to? Okay, and there's a few of these that probably shouldn't tell. And some of the older folks might get this one, the younger folks might not. Why did the cowboy get a dachshund? He was out riding the range and heard somebody yell, get along, little doggy. All right, you know how every ethnic joke starts out? Like this. So I'll tell a few Swedish jokes. I'm Swedish, so I can do that. So there's a gentleman sitting at a table, and he looks up at the waiter, and he says, what's that fly doing on my lutefisk? Waiter says, apparently gagging. Lena was on the swim team, and she normally did the freestyle. And the breaststroke young lady did not show up. And so the coach comes up and asks her if she would mind doing that. She says, yeah, that's fine. So she went out there and she did her best. And then she didn't do really well. She came in last, but, kind of kept up with everybody. And the coach comes up afterwards and says, well, Lena, I said, your first time being out there doing the breaststroke, you did, okay. She says, well, I think them other girls were using their arms. So there's 2 guys standing at a bar. One says to the other, I can tell from your brogue you're from the old country, laddie. He says, yeah, that I am. He says, I come from Killarney County. He says, me too, I'm from Killarney County. He says, what city did you grow up in? He says, well, it'd be O'Shane. I grew up in O'Shane County. He says, what school did you attend as a lad? He says, well, that would have been St. Mary's. I went to St. Mary's. And the bartender says, well, the O'Brien twins are drunk again. Let me see. I think those are about there's one other one here. I've got a good friend of mine, Dale. His uncle is a Catholic priest. And he was driving home from midnight mass this year. And he's out in the middle of nowhere, central Minnesota. There's nothing around. And so he's driving along, and all of a sudden there's a pig that shows up right in front of his car, and he hits the pig. So he gets out of the car, looks at the damage of the car isn't too bad, but that pig is not moving. And he doesn't know how to check the pulse on a pig or anything like that. So he figures the pig's dead, but he's looking around. He doesn't see any lights, has no idea what farm it came from, so he thought that he'd just go home and then he'd try and find the owner the next day. So he goes home. All of a sudden in the morning he wakes up and there's a banging on the door, and he opens up the door and there's the sheriff and the farmer. And the sheriff and the farmer say, yeah, we found out that you hit a pig last night, and that's my pig. And so the father standing here says, what? How in the world did you figure out it was me? Apparently the pig squealed. I think that's all the humor that I've got, but I do have a poem that my son wrote, and this is a little bit more on the serious side. My son's name is David Michael Converse, and he lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is called A Reason to Love. I see struggle, I see hate. I see a media using it to bait. I see politics using it for gain. I see images of families in pain. I see people trying to find a better way. I see people succumbing to lies every day. I see the hurt that's created causing crime. I see the impact of words creating lines. I see government use terror acts for agendas. I see enthusiasts unwilling to surrender. I see people getting burned by definitions. I myself consumed in a vulnerable position. I look for positive reports in what I see. I look, but I cannot find in disbelief. I look and find we've been cultured for our roles. On either side of this line, let's call them poles. But there's not just one line of which we hide, the lines defined by those unkind. To love we hate, our world's disgrace, created by fear and intolerance we've placed. Traits, race, gender, preference, my case, is simply to put our differences aside. Whether you're a cop, you're black, or you're white, I'd love to see a love between those in the street or high on a seat. Elected or just a citizen you'd see. See us get beyond this hateful sea of blood we spill without understanding. Open your mind to those who are commanding. Attention, listen, let them have their minute. Instead of cutting their time short, and in this listening you may find common ground in like mind. Temporary is this world, so learn to find a reason to love.